The T-90 is the current main battle tank of the Russian army and developed from the successful qualities of the preceding T-72 and T-80 series. Compared to its contemporaries, the T-90 is one of the best protected tanks in the world and also one of the most heavily armed combat systems. As with other Soviet-era tanks, the T-90 makes use of an integrated autoloader, three-man crew and low-profile design. With the fall of the Soviet Empire in 1991, the Russian military fell into a period of low morale and curtailed spending. As such, many projects were either shelved indefinitely or cancelled altogether. During the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Army enjoyed the prospect of fielding two main battle tanks side by side, beginning with the introduction of the T-64 in 1963. This was then later complemented by the T-72 of 1971. Both tank designs showcased an autoloader feeding a large caliber 125mm smoothbore main gun. The T-64 was designed as the technology-laden primary Soviet Army tank solution, while the T-72 was intended as the cheaper, production export-friendly Mark. In the end, however, it was the T-72 that gained the larger legacy thanks to export sales, while the T-64 was limited to Soviet territories due to its state-secret status. The T-64 was then modernized to become the T-80, and qualities of the popular T-72 were included in this revised design. The T-80 entered service in 1976 and became the primary main battle tank of the Soviet Army up until the collapse of the Soviet Empire in 1991. The T-80 was notable in its use of a gas turbine engine which promised higher power output over that of traditional diesel-fueled tank engines. However, the power pack was never wholly reliable and proved more fuel-thirsty, uneconomical and complicated to produce. Realizing an uncertain world was now upon them, Russian authorities began debating the merits of producing and operating two similar yet different concurrent main battle tank solutions. As such, the focus fell onto developing a modernized form of the T-72 with key qualities of the T-80 to overtake the aging pair of fighting vehicles. The fire control system of the T-80 was mated to the T-72 frame, while an auto-loading facility was retained, as was the proven 125mm smoothbore main gun, this amalgam creating the prototype designation of T-88. The engine of choice fell to a diesel-fueled installation capable of 830 horsepower, and the resulting product was then adopted as the T-90, essentially an evolution of the original T-72 line. Low-rate production of T-90 tanks began in 1993, and these were eventually followed by full-rate production vehicles beginning in 1995. Since then, some 1,670 T-90 tanks have been produced for Russia and several operators worldwide. Production is handled by the local concern of Uralvagonzavod based in Nizhny Tagil, Russia. As in T-72 before it, the T-90 utilizes a very low profile thanks to its two-man turret housing the commander and gunner. The autoloader is of a carousel design perfected throughout the decades and feeds the projectile and charge from two separate rungs. As in previous Soviet tanks, the T-90 supports firing of guided anti-tank missiles from the main gun barrel, and this can engage ground as well as aerial targets. The driver is seated in the front center of the hull with the turret immediately behind. The engine is situated in a rear compartment apart from the crew. The track system straddles the hull in the usual way and is dominated by its 6 double-tired, rubber-tired road wheels with the drive sprocket at the rear and the track idler at the front. Side skirt armor is a standard defensive measure seen on all T-90 tanks. The glassy plate is nearly vertical and adds basic protection against incoming enemy fire. Likewise, the turret is very squat with pointed edges, again providing a basic defense policy against incoming penetrating projectiles. The commander is afforded a raised cupola with vision blocks while the gunner manages his own turret roof hatch for entry or exit. Armor protection is a mix of steel and composites and further benefits from add-on explosive reactive armor blocks providing protection from heat, APFSDS rounds, kinetic and chemical penetrators. Blocks are affixed to the hull front, sides and turret as required. The armor scheme, fire control system and anti-missile measures are all descended from the T-80. An NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical, protection system and night vision equipment come standard. The STRA-1 anti-missile countermeasures suite is an optional fitting but nearly almost always incorporated to field units and serves to jam incoming signals such as those emitted from guided missiles. A laser warning receiver alerts the crew to tracking of the vehicle. The fire control system is fully digital and coupled to a thermal imaging device as well as laser rangefinder. Altogether, this allows for firing on the move as well as low light activity. A dozer blade is hidden under the bow of the hull and can be used to clear obstacles, while a mine-clearing plow can be added to the existing T-90 frame thanks to integrated connection points under the dozer blade. The T-90 makes use of the same main gun as featured on the T-72 and T-80 prior, the 125mm 2A46M smoothbore tank gun. As mentioned, the main gun retains the missile firing feature and its breech is fed through an autoloader. 43 by 125mm projectiles are carried aboard, and this can be a mix of HEFRAG, Heat FS and APFSDSD rounds as well as Sniper AT missiles. Secondary armament includes a 7.62mm PKT machine gun in a coaxial fitting next to the main gun with access to 2,000 rounds of ammunition. A 12.7mm NSV or cord heavy machine gun is mounted on the turret roof for anti-aircraft defense, and this is fed by 300 rounds of ammunition. 2 banks of 6 smoke grenade discharges allow the tank to present its own smoke screen to cover movements. Additionally, diesel fuel can be injected into the exhaust for a secondary smoke screen alternative, a staple feature of most Soviet tanks. T-90 tanks were given their baptism of fire in the Second Chechen War during the invasion of Dagestan in August of 1999. Dagestan lay at the shores of the Caspian Sea, to which Chechnya was bordered to the west. The First Chechen War proved something of a humiliation to the Russians as it resulted in a Chechen separatist victory and a withdrawal of Russian military forces after a formal ceasefire. During the conflict, the T-80 had shown its limitations in urban fighting, where Chechen guerrillas, utilizing hit-and-run tactics with rocket-propelled grenades, were able to disable over 200 Russian army tanks in a single month. The T-80 was designed with the expansive European countryside in mind, and urban fighting was not a part of its forte. Russian tankers proved ill-trained for the environment and were not effectively supported by accompanying ground troops and infantry fighting vehicles for close-in defense against such attacks. On August 7, 1999, the Islamic International Peacekeeping Brigade invaded the Russian Republic of Dagestan to begin the Second Chechen War, a war that would last until September 28. Having benefited from the poor showing of their T-80s in the preceding war, Russian officials moved to avoid mistakes by sending the T-90 into battle as a well-prepared instrument complete with an integrated anti-missile defense suite and accompanying forces. Armor protection was deemed excellent by Russian observers as T-90s sustained direct hits without any catastrophic losses. The Second Chechen War ultimately ended with a Russian victory and 2,500 enemy combatants killed to the Russian 279. The Russian victory did much to re-establish the image of the powerful Red Army that emerged from World War II. To date, the Russian military operates around 930 T-90 tanks, including some 930 T-90A models. One of the larger operators of the type is the Indian Army, having procured over 600 T-90S tanks to help shore up the limitations of its indigenous CHECHEN MBT program. A further 1,000 additional T-90 tanks may be added still. Modifications to these Indian versions to suit Indian military requirements has earned the tank the local designation of Bhishma. Algeria received 305 T-90A series tanks with orders placed back in 2009. Azerbaijan has ordered some 20 T-90 tanks while Turkmenistan manages 10 with an exercised option of 30 more to come. It is believed that Uganda received 44 T-90S tanks from Russia from an order of 100 strong in 2010.
Thanks for watching. Do not forget to like, subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks for your support.